Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Monday, January 12th. First up this morning, The Information published an exclusive deep dive looking at AI-powered dashcam maker Motive and the people assisting its AI behind the scenes. We will dive into that with the reporters who broke the story. We'll then discuss Google's weekend announcement about new AI shopping tools for Gemini. We're also taking an in-depth look at the story that we published over the weekend over why Robinhood shares have done so much better than Coinbase over the past year. We'll then turn to a conversation with the CEO of Austin-based Accelsius, which announced this morning it raised $65 million to scale its data center cooling technology. And we will end the show with our editor-in-chief, Jessica Lessin, who has a reaction to two big news stories this morning: Meta's appointment of Dina Powell McCormick as president and vice chairman, and Apple's decision to tap Google's Gemini for its AI Siri update. It's going to be a fun show, and so let's get right on into things. The Information published an exclusive deep dive into Motive, a company that sells AI-powered dash cams to monitor drivers of trucking companies. Ahead of its planned IPO this year, our reporters looked into the extent to which its AI tools rely on people checking things. Joining me now are the reporters behind that story: Cory Weinberg, Deputy Bureau Chief of Finance, and Michael Roddan, our finance reporter. Welcome to you both. It's great to see you this morning.
Hey, gosh.
Hey, how's it going?
So, Cory, we're talking about dash cams today. What is the dash cam at Motive supposed to do? What did you find? Walk us through all the reporting.
Motive is one of the leaders in this interesting industry that's really boomed over the last few years, selling these sort of software-enabled cameras to big trucking and logistics companies. They compete in a world where you might know publicly traded company Samsara. They're another company that sells these AI-powered dash cams, and they are purchased by these large trucking companies so they can keep tabs on their drivers, so they can know sort of what's actually happening inside the cab and on the road. Motive has this camera that is powered by AI. It uses computer vision models to detect when a driver is reaching for their cell phone or following too close on the road, and it's supposed to alert its ultimate customers, the trucking companies, of major violations that happen and even collisions.
So it's supposed to keep tabs on the drivers, basically, make sure that they're driving well. And I guess in the event that there's a crash of some kind, then I guess it alerts the company saying, hey, there's an issue, you got to respond to it. Is that the idea?
Yeah, companies want to get a beat on this, on anything bad that happens on the road. They need to know for insurance reasons, for dealing with the authorities, all that nasty stuff.
Okay. And this company has grown pretty big, right? I mean, you wrote that it's looking to go public this year.
Yeah, it crossed 500 million in annual recurring revenue back in September, and it's slated to be, unless the markets totally melt down, it's sort of the first major venture-backed listing this year.
So now the crux of the story is how much of this is AI and how much of this is actual people in the loop. What did you find in your reporting about the people that are helping the AI in this system?
The humans at Motive seem to play a pretty important role. Basically, every video snippet that the AI dash cams capture, so whether it's like a potential collision or a stop sign that a driver missed, those videos come in and they get fed to a team of 400 staff in Pakistan, whose job it is to review these videos in really quick succession. So they've got like a minute or half a minute to say, this is a real stop sign violation, or this is a crash. And then once those videos are verified, they get sent to the fleet manager. And so these humans, who are paid about the equivalent of $125 a month, are central to the company's claim that we're going to give fleet managers the most accurate representation of what's happening on the ground. The fleet managers aren't going to be in the dark about when there's a crash, or if they've driven past a stop sign, or if they've tailgated someone too close. So the company talks about that a little bit in their prospectus. They call it human in the loop. But we tried to really pull back the curtains on this and show exactly what's happening, which is that this team of 400 people are under increasing pressure to improve their accuracy, make sure they're not missing any collisions, and really drill down the time that they're getting these alerts to fleet managers. So it raises this question about, how important is this huge workforce of people clicking on 1,000 videos a day to the company, and while the company is also making these big claims about its AI technology and the accuracy of it, it tells potential investors that it has the most accurate offering on the market. It captures 99% of 15 safety events, and that puts it ahead of its competitors. But we're saying it's just like, well, if you look at how it actually works, there is this really big team of, 400 data annotators making sure
Right.
that they're clicking on, 500,000 videos a day or something like that.
Cory, I mean, I just want to get behind sort of why these the transition from human to AI, and which of these ways of doing this job is actually more accurate. Because one of the things that surprised me in your story was you both reported the extent to which, I mean, both of these systems can make mistakes. Which one ends up being better? I mean, how many missed collisions have there been on either side?
Yeah, that's one of the really interesting kind of practical and somewhat philosophical questions, I think, in all this, is by trying to use humans to really uh, drill down and nail the real edge cases that are difficult for AI to capture, the really long tail that sort of AI researchers would talk about. Uh, in sort of the pursuit of 100% or 99.99999% accuracy, is it better to use sort of these operation centers worth of humans, or will the AI models checking AI models be a better way to do it? And that's where there's some disagreement across the industry. We talked to some competitors like Samsara and some others that do it differently than Motive. Motive is certainly not running away from its approach. It's currently in the quiet period for its IPO, so they didn't talk to us for this story. But their CEO Shoaib Makani has said in the past that this is an approach that's working for them and it's working for their customers to get to as high of accuracy as possible.
And so, Michael, I wonder what is the bigger picture here around this story? You touched on it a little bit. I mean, this idea of companies marketing AI as AI when there are humans involved. Do you see this as a broader issue that the AI sector? I mean, we've talked about this with the robotics sector. I don't know. We've talked about it as much with computer vision on the show, but I mean, big picture, is this something that you are looking into a little more closely in your reporting?
Yeah, it's definitely like, AI is such a big thing at the moment. But I think this story shows the current limitations of AI and how rich and powerful it is. In a lot of cases, you still need humans working behind the scenes. In Motive, they've hinted at that in their prospectus, and the humans seem pretty central to, stacking up their AI claims. But, we've seen a lot of cases where companies have tried to, pull a bit of like a hoodwink over their customers. So it's like there was a builder AI that collapsed last year, I think, who said that they had this like really powerful AI technology, but in reality, it was just, thousands of sort of uh, humans behind the scenes in, developing countries tapping away. There was the Amazon supermarket where people could walk through that was supposedly all AI, but there was a bunch of people behind the scenes tracking what the customers put in their shelves. Even Waymo, which I take and I really like. Every now and then a human will have to intervene through a robot. They have to phone in and drive the car themselves. So I think that like it's a good sign for investors to just be really careful about what claims companies are making, and to like really try and dig into how the companies that say they have these like really powerful AI tools, how they actually work.
Cory, last question for you. You didn't have a chance to speak with the company because of the quiet period. I wonder if you did have the CEO and you had him in front of you. What questions would you want to know the answers to from them?
I want to know more specific, want to know the more specific detail on their plan to lower the rate of human review on sort of what the AIs capture. They've said publicly that they aim to reduce it over time. In our reporting, we weren't able to kind of determine whether they have or what their exact plans are. And I'm interested in sort of this trade-off that they have to make around, sort of paying for humans, to make sure that there's 100% accuracy versus the drive to actually build technology that works seamlessly. I think that's something that CEOs across Silicon Valley are grappling with.
Great. Well, Cory and Michael, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Cory Weinberg and Michael Roddan from our newsroom here at The Information. See you guys very soon. Okay.
Later.
Google is adding AI shopping tools for Gemini. The company announced a slate of AI commerce features over the weekend, including the ability to buy stuff with Gemini. AI in shopping is, of course, becoming an increasingly competitive battleground, and so I want to bring on our senior editor, Meredith Mazzilli, to break it all down. Meredith, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here.
Hey, Akash, thanks for having me.
It's the Friday Monday special
I
with
love it.
Meredith.
Yeah.
Always with
Exactly.
shopping.
Yep.
Always with shopping. Well, okay, so I want to get your initial reactions here to the tools because we were just talking on Friday about how OpenAI has dived into this agentic commerce space, I guess. We were talking about Amazon, and here we have Google coming up. And, what did you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this says a lot about how Google is responding to the threat of AI to their core search business, and maybe has a little less to do with, the timing of OpenAI's own in-chat checkout rollout and things like that. So I will unpack all of that, but let's first, I think, would be helpful to dig into what exactly it is that Google announced on Sunday. So number one, AI checkout inside Gemini, inside Google AI mode, which basically, like you said, lets you just buy stuff there without leaving Google, without going to other sites. You're starting the checkout there. And number two, another thing they announced that was super interesting was types of ads that would go inside that AI interface. So that might look like promotions or special offers that the retailers basically pay to place inside that AI interface. So that's a big shift for Google. So it's moving from Google sending you out to other sites, basically getting paid for those clicks to send to other sites and not really caring what happens after that. Now what they're trying to do is bring more of that shopping inside AI and controlling more of that process. And, to me, that reads really just as, okay, the core AI search business, or the core regular search business, rather, is under pressure.
Right, right.
So, we did see OpenAI in September announce something very similar, checking out inside of ChatGPT. But I think, for OpenAI and Google, they're just kind of arriving at the same place independently. OpenAI, they are trying to build monetization from scratch, whereas Google is trying to defend their existing monetization or come up with new ways to make money.
So I want to ask you about how much of an advantage you think Google has here over OpenAI, because one of the key parts of this is that they're going to be leveraging Google Pay, which is something that's been in place for a while. And we've had Ann Guillen, our e-commerce reporter, on the show here talking about how difficult payments is as a thing to figure out, not just with AI, but at all. And so Google seems to have payments figured out, and maybe they've built that. The other part here is it's tough to get data from retailers. So, maybe they don't have an advantage there. I mean, do you think Google has a leg up here?
So I think the fact that Google does have its own Google Pay and its own digital wallets is definitely an advantage for them. As we've written about before, there are just lots of really tricky payments and product data things that just make AI shopping at a very basic level very difficult. And because they've dabbled in different shopping efforts before, they work a lot with merchants on traditional ads, they do have more experience in that space. I think what it's going to keep coming down to with all of these AI tools is merchant adoption. And I think that's the big open question right now. Will merchants want Google to be taking more control over the whole purchase process away from the merchant. So kind of cutting out the merchant's own website, their own branding, more and more out of the equation. And that's the open question. And that's the same for all of these AI shopping tools. I think with merchants that maybe have less differentiated of products, you're going to see more adoption on that side. I think that explains why you see some big box retailers really jumping in. But when it comes to kind of mom and pop shops, small brands that maybe go direct to consumer and really want to tell that brand story, I think the calculus is a little different for them.
So you don't think this is, I mean, this is not really a slam dunk for all retailers insofar as keeping up with the times. You're saying for the big retailers, sure, because they have to have this sort of omni-channel approach and be everything everywhere. But for the small retailers, I mean, it's sort of a walk away from that D2C relationship that we saw so many retailers getting excited about building a couple years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everybody in this equation is trying to figure out, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. Will shoppers actually want to do this? Will merchants participate in such a way that there's enough stuff out there for shoppers to want to do this? And can the AI companies, payment companies, everybody figure it out? But for the merchant adoption specifically, yes, like that's still kind of the big open question. We actually have one of our reporters on the ground at NRF in New York this week, which is where Google did announce all these products yesterday.
That's the national, what is it? It's the National Retail.
Yeah. So
something retail.
Big show.
It's the big retail conference
Yeah, the big one.
in New York.
Exactly. So those smaller DTC brands, I think, is really a bit of an open question to see where they land on this. Because,
Right.
On the flip side, if you sit it out and that's where shopper behavior goes, it's very difficult to catch up potentially.
And then, the last thing that I think is worth talking about is Martin Pierce, our co-executive editor, wrote last night in the briefing about Google's efforts to become more of an e-commerce or shopping player in the past. And I guess, I mean, there is a reality that, yeah, even though they have all these tools established in place, I mean, Google Shopping, I guess, I mean, we do, there's Google Flights, there's, I'm trying to think I do hotels through Google Maps, but I'm not really shopping through Google just yet. So it seems to have had some trouble in that arena before.
Right. But though I think in the past, the stakes weren't necessarily as high, kind of circling to what we were back talking about at the beginning of this segment, with this idea that the core search business could be under more of a fundamental threat from just people shopping and thinking about looking at products in different ways. I think there's just more pressure there to get it right this time.
Right. Well, earnings season is coming up, so I guess we'll get more answers to that effect. Meredith, I want to thank you for coming on the show. That is Meredith Mazzilli, our senior editor here at The Information.
All right. Thanks, Akash.
Okay. Robinhood versus Coinbase is a rivalry that increasingly has been heating up as they both compete on similar trading tools. But last year, while Robinhood stock nearly tripled, Coinbase shares fell 12%. My colleague Yueqi Yang wrote a deep dive looking at that delta over the weekend, and I want to bring her on to talk all about it. Yueqi, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here.
Hey, Akash.
It's the most exciting rivalry of the season, Robinhood versus Coinbase. Why has Robinhood stock done so much better than Coinbase? This is not even like, this is crazy. I didn't know the numbers until you did it. Down 12%, 100 and something percent for Robinhood. What's going on?
So this is a rivalry that's years in the making, but really last year we started to see the stocks of Coinbase and Robinhood to diverge, and investors like Robinhood stock because it's a more diversified bet. As you know, Robinhood offers stocks trading, they offer crypto trading, they have a big options business, And crypto is only 20% of Robinhood's total revenue, whereas Coinbase generates all of its revenue from the crypto industry. And I also noticed that Robinhood last year really took advantage of the regulatory environment under Trump by moving very quickly and launching new products aggressively. And one case in point is prediction markets. Robinhood launched prediction market in late 2024, initially offering the bet on the 2024 US presidential election, and it quickly doubled down by adding more bets. And Robinhood said that prediction markets has since become its fastest growing business line by revenue in its entire history.
So one of the interesting parts here is for the longest time, I mean, the way when I covered crypto a couple years ago, Coinbase shares sort of seem to have mirrored Bitcoin's performance. And I feel like Coinbase has tried to get away from that a little bit with its subscription offerings and make its revenue and its profitability a little bit less volatile. I feel like Coinbase still hasn't really been able to get away from that tying to Bitcoin prices at large, right?
Yes, and Bitcoin was down on the year last.
Right.
I think you're right. Coinbase generates all of its revenue from the crypto industry. I would say that it has done a good job building up a bigger portion of the revenue from subscription businesses and services, which are more sticky than just trading fees. And Coinbase now is entering stock markets, stock offerings, as well as prediction markets. So one big thing will be watch out for next year is to what extent Coinbase can gain traction with their non-crypto products.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that this is more a story of Robinhood really excelling, or is it Coinbase falling behind?
I think they're competing head on, and so. And
I think it's Robinhood excelling. I'm gonna be upfront with it. You know, I mean, hard to argue that 180 something percent growth over the course of a year is not a company excelling. But you know, I feel like it's a little faster to innovate, and there's more products. I mean, they have the credit cards too. They're really getting a much more diverse pool of traders, right?
yeah, but I would say that Coinbase and Robinhood actually have a lot of overlap with their users because they're both going after young users who love retail users, who love speculations and trading, who are largely US based. So this is a competition that will only intensify.
Now, do they make money the exact same way? Because I know that Robinhood, payment for order flow was that way of Robinhood keeping charges basically to nothing, right? For traders, they weren't making money off their traders. It was more off the, I guess, the market makers that they were routing the trades to. Coinbase, I think, still takes a transaction fee off their trades. So, are the business models entirely different here, or are they quite similar still?
Coinbase crypto trading is still their biggest revenue generator, and Coinbase does charge a high fee, especially from retail users for offering crypto tradings. And they have been able to maintain that fee for years just because they're so popular and so dominant in the US, and they haven't really faced too much pricing pressure to reduce their fee. For the stock product, which is a new product at Coinbase, Coinbase will also offer zero fee trading. So in that sense, on the stock product, they're charging it's the same business model as Robinhood's stock product.
And going back to what you were talking about at the very start, prediction markets seems to be the new in thing that both of these companies are exploring closely. And there's also this notion, you know, Robinhood is getting into, I guess, giving exposure to private companies to whatever extent it can. How do you think this story plays out this year? And prediction season is over now. We're in the middle of January, but do you see the companies being a little bit more closely tied together in terms of performance? Do you see prediction markets changing the landscape altogether? And maybe, I don't know, maybe Polymarket comes in, you know, we don't know where people will go really.
I think prediction market is important going into 2026. There are some big events that people are watching out for. The World Cup is going to happen this year, and that's something that a lot of people are excited about betting on prediction markets for. The U.S. midterm elections will also happen. So prediction market is really rely on these big news events and cultural events and sports events, and there are several that are scheduled to occur this year. And for Coinbase, so we'll see how their stock trading product perform. A lot of users already have their stock investing capability elsewhere. So we'll see to what extent they're able to gain traction there.
Great. I was just watching the Golden Globes last night, and I saw that they too had their Polymarket partnership. I guess they were predicting who was going to win the next award. Anyway, it's all moving very quickly, and I want to thank you for coming on to help us make sense of it. That is Yueqi Yang, our crypto reporter here at The Information. Okay. A new data center cooling company is raising a new funding round. Accelsius, which specializes in the business of liquid cooling, is raising $65 million. The Information wrote about that news in our AI infrastructure newsletter, where we get into some analysis around the business as well. I want to bring on Josh Claman, CEO of Accelsius, to help us unpack the big news. Josh, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
It's good to be here. Thanks.
So you had some big news today. Tell us about what your company does.
So we make two-phase direct-to-chip liquid cooling. Liquid cooling in the data center is a huge challenge now. As chips get hotter, the wattage of chips continues to increase. And within a rack or a server in a rack, the density of power and therefore heat, residual heat, continues to increase. This is a huge challenge for data centers to manage this. A few years ago, there was a kind of a competition of new architectures for cooling. As liquid cooling, the consensus was building the liquid cooling to be required for the data center market over the next few years. And one was immersion. When we founded our company, we thought that was interesting, but probably an impractical architecture for broad adoption.
Immersion was the way that they used to cool it. What does that even mean?
Immersion means you actually put the server equipment in a pool of non-conductive fluid. So it's kind of a bathtub of non-conductive fluid. So the whole server goes in.
Huh.
This had a lot of hype, 3 or 4 years ago. I think it captured sort of the attention or the imagination of the lay public. It seemed like sort of science fiction-y.
Yeah.
So that was out
Just put it in a pool. Yeah.
Yeah. And then water, simply, pumping water over plates that are installed on top of the chips. Basically you have a couple variables there. You can pump water faster for if it's higher heat, or you can pump colder water. But it's limited. And we see with the next generation of chips and the one after that, the concentration of heat is going to be such that water is going to struggle through convection or what it's called sensible cooling. It's going to struggle to carry that heat off. So Accelsius founded a company to develop a really fit for purpose cooling architecture for data centers going forward. And it's based on, sorry, go ahead.
How does it work? Yeah, tell us.
Yeah, it's based on two-phase physics. Which means you pump a non-conductive fluid, over a plate on top of the chip, and you orchestrate a phase change. So from fluid to vapor.
Okay.
And if you think about your high school physics class,
I'm thinking about it right now. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. It captures a huge amount of heat energy by creating that phase change, much more than just convection cooling or carrying that heat off without that phase change could do. There are a lot of advantages to this. One, it's a very efficient cooling. So we can tie this into some of the conversation over the last few days that Jensen created this sort of shake in the market because he said,
right. Yeah, because correct me if I'm wrong, but he basically said that the new Rubin chip family was not going to need as much of the chilling equipment, I think, right?
That's what he said, and it shook up sort of the big chiller manufacturers in the world, JCI and Vertiv, et cetera. We don't think that's true. We think that data center cooling is going to be a challenge, and you need to reject that heat efficiently. The reliance on chillers will continue to decrease because you will be able to warm that primary, what's called the primary water loop in the data center up. The interesting thing is that for every 1 degree C, you don't have to cool that water. You save about 4% energy a year, which obviously for a scaled out data center is incredibly material.
So I just want to understand this. Are you suggesting that basically what Jensen was saying about things not getting as hot and us not needing as much cooling equipment, is it your view that that's not going to be the case and that they're still going to produce as much heat? This is going to still be a problem?
Well, I think that here's what I'll say. I am not as confident that water-based solutions, so just pumping water over chips, is going to create that efficiency. So I do not share Jensen's confidence in that. I do think two-phase technologies will allow that water loop to be warmed to X degrees. Say he used the 45 degrees C. I think that's a good benchmark.
And the difference here is that when he says pumping water over top of the plate, it's not going from liquid to gas. It's just a stream of water.
It's called single phase water cooling typically, as opposed to two-phase refrigerant cooling.
Right. That was not in the high school physics class.
Right. Yeah, exactly. The key here is that if we can, Accelsius, what we focus on is running a very efficient IT loop cooling with refrigerant. It still connects to a primary water loop. But because of the efficiency, we can keep the case temperatures of those GPUs down below throttle point and still warm the water in the primary water loop that does heat rejection through that chiller or that dry tower heat rejection loop. So I think we have if you take away from Jensen's message that we need to think about data center efficiency, and that any inefficiency, any sort of wasted watt coming into the data center is not a good thing, particularly when you're talking about 500 megawatt or 1 gigawatt data centers. We agree completely with that. We just think the best approach is to go to two-phase cooling within the IT loop. And we're the lead in that sector.
I want to ask you about the data center story at large, given that you probably work with all of these companies that are trying to build these facilities faster than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
What are the biggest challenges that you see them facing? Look, cooling, obviously, in the space that you're in, that's one thing they have to figure out. But do you see the biggest challenge being the speed at which these facilities are trying to get created? Do you see there being actual technical challenges with the scale of the size of the facility? I mean, in the end of all this, I'm sort of wondering, demand is sort of what this all depends on, but do you get facilities that at all maybe pause or even cancel their construction because maybe the landscape changes? What do you think of all that?
There's a lot to that question. I think that the data center market will continue to expand. Whether it expands exactly as predicted or 75% of that, it really doesn't matter. It's still one of the more exciting growth stories over the last few decades. I do think there are going to be some technical challenges. And there are two legs to this. One, how do you power these incredibly high density racks? So people are talking about new sort of power conditioning architectures. It's a big area of a lot of innovation. The other one is cooling these.
Right.
I do worry that some of these, it's a fairly conservative sector that is being thrown into the deep end very quickly. If you think about the data center sector for 30 or 40 years, it's really innovated incrementally. And suddenly with the advent of AI, they have to figure out how to cool these things and power these things and do all that in a real step function. It's not at all linear. And my fear is that people are, because they are struggling to keep up or stay up on the learning curve of all these different innovations, they're going to make some bad decisions. And I think water.
What do you think? What do you think is that? Is that water cooling is a bad decision?
Water cooling is a bad decision. I think one, It doesn't have the heat removal headroom that you need to sustain that infrastructure for 5 to 10 years, because these chips are just going to continue to get incrementally more powerful. Also, there are some other issues with this. There's a linear relationship between flow rate and heat transport. So if a rack goes from 50 kilowatts to 100, or 100 to 200 kilowatts, or now we're talking about 1 meg racks, you're talking about flow rates of about 1.5 liters per minute per kilowatt. So if you go to one of these trade shows, you'll see that the back of racks have fire hoses, literally fire hoses connected to the back. To me, that's impractical. If there's a leak, you're going to have what they call blast radius of water spraying across very expensive server equipment that's going to destroy a lot of equipment. You have this headroom issue with that, and you also have some fairly arcane technical issues, which I won't go into for this audience.
What about missteps on the power side of this? Where could you see that happening?
Well, I think there's experimentation with DC to the rack now rather than AC. So you hear a lot about 800 volt DC to a rack. There are very few companies on earth who know how to do that. So there's a lot of innovation happening there, and a lot of the same tech adoption issues that we're facing on the cooling side. How do you give a sector the technology they need while saying, hey, we know it's new technology, but you're going to need it, right? So you gotta start adopting this stuff. I think some of the power conditioning folks are facing those same fairly typical tech adoption curves, which need to be just incredibly compressed now to match the demand in the market.
And so, last question for you here. All these projects that are getting announced from big tech companies, fast-growing tech companies, there's data centers popping up in every state now, it seems, and the state governments are getting behind it. Is there a chance at all that some of these projects don't pan out, and that it was a nice looking press release, but 3 years down the line, maybe it wasn't able to sort of, be constructed either cost efficiently or fast enough? What are you expecting down the line here with all of these data centers that we're seeing?
I think you are seeing some risk there. And I think a lot of it, you see an announcement, we're going to break ground on a 1 gigawatt data center or whatever. Well, do you have the generators? The lead time of generators is like 24 months now. Do you have transformers? So I think there is a little bit of kind of a Pollyannish sort of attitude in the market, like we'll pull it together, we'll implement as planned. I think there could be some delays. Whether the demand itself actually is realized and these centers are built and these LLMs are scaled out and then the inference centers come into kind of place as predicted, that's a little bit above my pay grade. My expectation is that the hype is a little bit beyond the demand right now, as it typically is when you have breakthrough technologies. I think there's going to be kind of a couple rough years where people reassess, but then it'll kind of line up from that point going forward.
Great. Well, Josh, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Josh Claman, the CEO of Accelsius, here on TITV. Okay. Meta has appointed Dina Powell McCormick as president and vice chair. I want to bring on editor-in-chief Jessica Lessin to help us break down the news. Jessica, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here.
Great to be here, Akash. Busy news morning already.
So, Dina Powell McCormick, what do we know about her? Why is Zuckerberg going with her? Tell us your take on it all.
Yeah, and this is a big news, Akash. I mean, it's sort of the third time in Meta's history that Mark has had a deputy like this by his side. Dina really combines several things. First of all, she is an ultimate insider in the world of the Middle East, in how it operates, in the funding coming out of it. She has spent much of her career as a banker focused on that region. Mark highlighted this in something that is going to help fuel the company's AI boom. And so I think that's a big part of it. The second is she is as insider as it gets in U.S. politics. You can see this morning the comments from Trump and the Trump administration and people close to him celebrating this move. This gives Meta an even more direct line to the White House.
Okay. And tell me, you said I'm trying to draw historical parallels here. You said this is the third deputy that Zuckerberg has appointed before. So this is sort of the Sheryl Sandberg role. Is that what this is, or is this something
it's
different?
what it's become. And I think you're going to see a lot of headlines comparing, because people like to compare women to women. So I think we should not do that. But if you look, Mark, in building Meta, then Facebook, has always looked for a strong number two to do the things that either he doesn't want to do or thinks he's not very good at, but are of growing importance to the company. And I think back in the earliest days, that was building the ads business under Sheryl. Then we had more recently Nick Clegg, who was in this lead policy kind of role, very focused on Europe. And now we have Dina. And so I think it's interesting. Obviously, there are a number of other senior leaders around here, around Mark and around the company. But I think this is a move to really address that intersection of politics and business that's of growing importance, and a sign that Mark expects that to be more and more of the company's time.
Hmm. And I do want to get to the Google news in a second here, because we also had the Google news that just dropped. But I wonder what reporting questions you have here, looking at what initiatives she helps lead going forward. Or, I mean, we're still waiting for all of those high-profile hires from the AI team to really pan out. We, are waiting for new versions of the Llama models to drop. What are you watching for here?
And my phone's kind of going off this morning, Akash, with people who were very positive on the reaction to this hire. And I'll say that's from people, former Meta employees, current Meta employees, people around the company, people who've been critical of the company. I think there is this sense that she will bring new skills to the table, new relationships. So I think those are the open reporting questions around this role. Obviously, the big question is, while those researchers are toiling away chasing superintelligence, what is the company's spend going to look like? What are its operations when it comes to the building out of AI infrastructure? Who are the partners who are going to help fund that? And I think Dina is going to be in the center of all of those conversations.
Right. Okay, so let's get to the Apple Google news. So Apple has said now it's going with Google, and I got to tell you, 2026, I mean, what a year for Google already. We just saw, and we just talked earlier in the show about the shopping features that Google has unveiled with Gemini. Apple is saying they're going with Google. Obviously, this is a relationship we know has been close for quite some time. What do you make of this?
Well, it's really tough news for OpenAI. So if you rewind a little bit, Apple was struggling with Siri, still is. And Sam Altman and OpenAI were actually the first to the partnership table last year. And I think kudos to them. It shows Altman's deal-making skills and power that they got a kind of modest deal with Apple. And we still don't know actually how beneficial it was. But Siri was routing some questions to ChatGPT. Then Google, a bigger company, presumably takes longer to negotiate, also negotiates kind of a similar arrangement. They're in conversations, and the headlines today are just the culmination of that. And I think you're right. I don't know if we can call one of my 2026 predictions checked off, Akash, but I said Gemini seals a major partnership with a kind of rival competitor. I actually wasn't thinking of this one. So more to come. But yes, I think it's a sign of not just the Gemini technology. Let's face it, Apple and Google have a very, very, very long history of partnering around search and so many other things. I think they were probably waiting for the regulatory decks to clear a little bit because of those big antitrust cases that have largely been resolved, although there's implementation questions. So I kind of think this was inevitable. And yes, it's good for Google. And it's going to leave OpenAI, it's going to put the pressure on them to continue to build their own distribution, which they've done a great job of.
Their own hardware. I mean, I'm just thinking about, they need hardware now if they're going to get it in people's hands even more so. I mean, I wonder what Johnny Ive is looking at this and saying, okay, well, we'll get back to work, I guess, right?
I mean, Altman's always known he's had to control his own destiny. I think he's also been really savvy at sealing those Microsoft deals, those early Apple deals, to try and get a leg up. But the incumbents are here to play. Google and those legacy relationships are still intact. So it absolutely raises the pressure on all sorts of distribution, those we use today and those yet to be invented.
Great. Well, Jessica, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Jessica Lessin, our editor-in-chief and founder here at The Information. Okay. Well, that does it for today's show. I want to thank you for tuning in today. A reminder, we are on this stream Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm already excited for our next show tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Monday. Bye-bye for now.